introducing our host for today, Sam. He was diagnosed as half blind when he was 18 years old. He's just graduated from Ravensbourne University studying advertising and brand design. He won bronze for this particular project that he's actually going to talk us through today. It's all about visual impairment within the creative industries. And he's actually been snapped up already by a company called Wilderness, and he is now their junior video editor, which is fantastic. So I will just unshare my screen and I'll hand over to you, Sam.
Thank you very much, Sam. So yeah, welcome everyone to this talk. Thanks for coming, really appreciate it. Thank you, Sam, for setting this up, and thank you, Paul, as well. So yeah, just a little insight about myself. So yeah, my name's Sam, I'm 28 years old. I'm a creative that happens to be visually impaired. So as Sam said, I was diagnosed with visual impairment at 18. As far as I can remember, I always enjoyed doing creative things. Like I was always into doing art. I did loads of drawing, I used to draw everything. It was like my passion. And then I also loved football. And unfortunately, when I turned 18, both sort of collided. And yeah, I got hit with a football when I was 18. And unfortunately, it tore my central retina in my right eye and turned me half blind. So from sort of then, I had a lot of issues with my mental health, and I decided not to go to university. I didn't feel like I could do anything creative anymore. I tried to do a lot more sort of drawing as the years went by. I wasn't really in love with it as much as I was, and I really sort of like struggled. And I got to a point where I felt like I needed to pursue like what my passions were, and I found out more about getting into graphic design. And yeah, I mean, having a creative outlet just helped me so much get through this whole like process of becoming a visually impaired person. So it was like a real struggle. It was like the prime 18 years old. I was like transitioning, thinking I'm gonna go to university, and then everything, all of that sort of plummeted. But then from that, it's like knowing that I still have a lot of vision, and looking at other like people that are suffering with a lot more severe disabilities, it really helped me appreciate the vision that I had rather than focusing on the vision that I didn't. So I'm really lucky to be able to still live a normal life without it affecting me majorly. So as I got more into just getting more confident in general, I managed to get myself a job. I was growing in confidence. I was doing a lot more sort of graphic design, learning a lot more about it. And I started working as a video editor for my cousin, a company called Table Tennis Daily. And we did like a lot of YouTube stuff, a lot of After Effects, a lot of video editing. And I applied for university at Ravensbourne for a graphic design course. And unfortunately, I got turned down. And then they turned around to me and said, I think you might be more suited to advertising and brand design, which was probably the best thing that anyone had ever done to me. Like I was introduced to Derek Yates, we had a great conversation, and I ended up finding out so much more to sort of like just design in general, from the strategic side to learning about insights, just to learn about things that you might not have to use your vision to have a really good skill set in. And luckily for me, it really worked out, and I had really amazing classmates that were probably on this call now. So, and thank you for helping me get through it. Like my parents helped me get through it, and there were certain things that were really helpful for me. I mean, being an older student, I think that helped me, gave me the confidence, having a lot of people come to me, asking me questions for sort of support, being an older student. And those sort of things helped me grow my confidence. There were certain struggles, certain, like my reading speed wasn't as quick as other people's, and I felt like I had to work almost twice as hard to keep up with all of the talent that was in my class. So some of the things that I sort of learned whilst I was graduating that really helped me was obviously like having blue filtered glasses, which you can probably see the blue tints in my eyes now, and having like blue screens and having extra screens really helped me get through like spending a lot of time looking at screens and dealing with like eye strain and relieving headaches and stuff. So there were certain things that really helped me get through that process. So leading on from uni, I graduated with a first, won a bronze for this project I'm going to talk through in a minute, which I was extremely happy with. I then was recommended by my course leader, Derek Yates, for a job at Wilderness. So yeah, a little bit about Wilderness. We're a social media company, like really amazing agency. We work with entertainment brands. We deliver work across like all social media platforms on a global scale. And they was super, not really had any issues in terms of entering agency. Originally, I was a little bit apprehensive about getting into agency work, and actually they've been super welcoming. I haven't even needed to ask for anything. I've got 2 screens at work, and it's great, and the people couldn't be more supportive. So I think that was one of the obstacles that I was really struggling to get over, was entering the real world, and they made it so much easier for me. And I know a lot of people that have had a similar experience. So when they're entering the creative industries, that people have been super supportive and super friendly and super not judgmental, very inclusive, very diverse. And it's been a very, very positive experience so far. So a little bit about what my project is. So what is See Different? So See Different was a brand that I developed for my FMP to highlight visual impairment within the creative industries. It's a brand to start conversation, learn about and empower visually impaired people. And why did I do this? So roughly 285 million people are living with a visual impairment. It's been set to triple by 2050, especially with all of the technology, people looking at phones, people looking at screens. Visual impairment is becoming a lot more rife. So people living with visual impairment are also 3 times more likely to suffer from depression. So having a creative outlet was something that helped me change my life. It's also been proven to help people deal with their mental health. So taking steps towards understanding visual impairment and working to design for accessibility for the future will help develop a much brighter, more accessible future. So yeah, so let's get on to my project. So leading on from this brand, I developed this book, which I actually got printed. So this book was to touch on how to design for a clearer future. It looks at the eye focusing both on the dark and the light of visual impairment. So the idea of See Different is to empower people about having a passion for designing for a clearer future. It's a mission to raise awareness that visual impairment should not stop people from establishing a career in the creative industries. So on this project, the sort of idea was that I wanted to learn about more. It was learn about more about visual impairment myself. It was very therapeutic for me. It was like looking into more visual impairments helped me deal with my own. And I felt like it was a very important process, something that I avoided for a long time. So I wanted to almost like understand it and find out what it's like to see through the eyes of different people who are suffering with different visual impairments. So before sort of like design, I tried to understand what it was like to see through the eyes of different visual impairments. So moving on from this, I took loads of images and I adapted them to showcase what it's like to see through the eyes. And just a little disclaimer, each person's eye condition will differ slightly to the images that I will show, but these will be more sort of like the severe side of certain visual impairments. So there are 8 levels of visual impairments, from normal vision to blind vision. These are not what people's eyes actually look like. As a disclaimer, these are just sort of like the levels of what people will see from the other side of their eyes. So my visual impairment is a torn retina. So my torn retina varying loss of sight. So torn retina is varying loss of sight. I have a central tear in my right eye, and this is the vision that I see out of my right eye. So I'm very lucky to still have some peripheral vision. So going on from this, I was looking at different visual impairments such as AMD and RINIA, and just trying to showcase the multiple impairments that people are suffering with Best disease and cataracts and CSR, which is central serous retinopathy, which affects the central area of your retina as well. Coats disease, Charles Bonnet syndrome, diabetic retinopathy, which a lot of people deal with as they get older in age, and dystrophy, epiretinal membrane, glaucoma. And it's just sort of to showcase almost like the vast amount of different types of visual impairments there are. Light sensitivity. There are some that I've discovered since making this book that are not in here. I mean, there's so many different types of visual impairments, some that are still being recognized today as new visual impairments that haven't been recognized. So it's like it's very important to kind of like to think about design when you're starting a project of how can you access. And sorry, Kat, to download the PowerPoint, I will share a WeTransfer. Sorry, just reading the chat. If you do have any questions in the chat, I do have the chat up on my screen, so you can ask me any questions as I go along. So I also looked at color blindness. So I found this color blindness, Cobless color blindness simulator. So if you are interested in taking photos and looking at different color contrast, you can put it in this color blindness simulator, and it will show you the different types of color blindness that people see out of their eyes. So it can give you more of an understanding of the color contrast that you're using in design and in projects. And if people will struggle like looking at your design. So from this, I started looking at how can we design to help create a brighter, more accessible future. Fix your face. Talking about typefaces and typography, there's a lot of issues with a lot of typefaces, such as the letters I, 1 and L, like Gill Sans is the example here on the left-hand side. There, you cannot differentiate that. I mean, most people struggle to differentiate that in the first place, but like just these little nuances of not having enough spacing, or having enough, or having mirroring on your text, or not having a good font size, really makes it much more difficult for people with visual impairment to read. So it's best like to stick to a nice typeface, but with glyphs and with like accents. It's good to bold your letters out to avoid blocks of capital letters, underlined or italicized text, to use the highest contrast possible. Use left alignment, 1.5 line spacing to space out your letters, and just use high contrasting colors at all costs. So there's someone that I found from the readability group called Bruno Mag. I think his name's Bruno Mag or Bruno Mag, how you pronounce it. Worked for the likes of Amazon, Nokia, HP, Airbnb, Netflix, and they're all really great examples of how to develop an accessible brand. Especially he's worked for BBC as well, and I think BBC, they have a policy which would be amazing to look up, where they have an accessibility policy across their whole brand, and that they need to stick by, which obviously BBC on a global scale needs to be super accessible. So I think that's a really good example of how to use accessibility within brand design. So good typography is super important, but the size of your typography is very, very important. For instance, when reading on screens, it's best to stick to, I'd say, about 14 point up, especially with documentation. And it does differ with like books. Books at 16 point is definitely preferred, and A4 size if possible. But like doing like the difference between reading at 12 point font in comparison to reading at 16 point font is quite substantial. So it's always something that's good to consider. So looking at color theory, so there's a lot of different like color contrast. So the colors on the left hand side here, these are the colors that I chose for See Different to be the most high contrasted colors for different types of color blindness. And as a showcase on the right hand side is how some types of color blindness would see those colors. So the most common type of color blindness would see these colors as they are on the right hand side, so they still have a high contrast. So an example of different types of color blindness is tritanomol. I can't pronounce that one. Deuteranope, protanope, and tritanope. So these are the most common types of color blindness. Someone I found by the name of Paul Toll was a color scientist. He did a lot of color theory, did develop color schemes with using like mathematical descriptions of color differences and two main types of colorblind vision. So if you wanted to find a really good color palette with really good color contrast that deals with color blindness, Paul Toll is a great example of someone who just literally has, I'd say, hundreds of different color schemes that you can look at and that you can use for accessible colors. So in terms of like UX design, so textures instead of color. So colorblind users find it difficult to tell the difference between certain colors. For instance, green, red, brown can look super similar. So the best thing to do is, if you are using these colors, have patterned overlays to differentiate the two. A lot of the problems that I come across, especially on, I'd say, more old-fashioned websites, is that sometimes you'll have an accept and a cancel button, but sometimes they don't have accept or cancel written on them, or they're too small to understand the text and they're just red and green and you can't differentiate what the two are. Yes, Jake, sorry, I just see your message. I will actually share a link in the chat now for people to download. Yes, there we go. So I've shared that in the chat now. So traffic light, for example, red means stop, amber means get ready, green means go. Very simple, but the whole simple process behind it was that it's more about first, second, and third place. So if the principle is put into design, instead of like a green and red button with no text or iconography, there should be an indication of what the function does. So if you always have an indication of what your function does within your UX design, it's going to make it so much easier for people to access your website. So looking at like sort of like visual images and alt text, there are a lot of screen readers on the internet. They make up quite a large percentage of people that will be viewing your websites. So alt text captures are very, very important. So if the image is a photograph, drawing, painting, your text needs to describe the image as concisely as possible. Having long alt text can result in poor user experience. So it's definitely good. Simplicity is obviously king. So keep things simple, especially when describing an image for screen readers. So alt text should typically be accurate, equivalent, and presenting the same content and function of the image. So if we move on to sort of like iconography, so I'm going to try, I'm quite aware of time, I don't want to spend too long. So icons and symbols that convey a ton of information. They really help people comprehend directions, signs, and interfaces. So it's important that we create them so they can reach the largest amount of people possible. They should also, if possible, have alt text on, which is something that's not done very often. A lot of on-screen readers will struggle with iconography just because they simply see it blur on the screen, or they can't see the screen at all. So make sure that you have alt text on the iconography, and that your iconography, if possible, should be scalable or at quite a large rate. So layout. So layout obviously is super important. Something, unfortunately, you can't cater to all visual impairments with. I'd say the most common thing to do is centralize all of your most important assets on your website. So in terms of UX, if you have all of your important information on the corner, if you have stuff in the corners, a lot of people are going to lose that. And I'd say dominantly, the best thing to do is have your most important assets centralized on your website. So lighting and glare. So one of the things that I found with lighting and glare is that when I was printing this book, was that glossy paper is a real problem. Glossy paper, like when it hits the sun, it becomes so difficult to read. So there are so I think definitely avoiding certain things such as glossy paper, and also on screens is it can be very difficult for people. I mean, as a contrast of white and black, which I am using a lot here, can sometimes struggle for people that have severe light, that have a severe issue with lighting and glare. It becomes very reflective. So when designing, sometimes it's best to dim the light on your screen. So if it's still legible when it's very dim, then it's definitely going to be a lot more legible for people who are struggling with lighting and glare. So that's why contrast is so important. Okay, so logo design. So the reason why I chose this simple logo design was because it's relatable with people with visual impairment. The whole idea behind it was to do with blindness and signs, so such as dog leads, visual impairment with the eye and the cross through, and the fact that it can still be seen with blurred vision and still be recognized. So there was a test that was done. I can't remember. So there was this test that was done using like popular logos such as Coca-Cola, Nike, and Apple, seeing how legible they are, the worse the blurred vision gets. So this was like a really interesting experience for me, like seeing what the worst performers were for different logos. I mean, McDonald's was one that stood out very well. Puma is quite good. Nike's quite good. So I think it's very important when you're choosing your typography and you're designing your logo to put a Gaussian blur on your logo and make it heavier and heavier to see if you can still create a distinctive mark out of your logo that can still be that you can still recognize. So from here, I sort of started looking at inspiration. I wanted to know what other sort of like visually impaired people that were out there in the creative industry, like something that I did sort of struggle finding a lot of people firsthand, and a lot of my research would have come from just like sourcing everything online. So I found out that Claude Monet was like someone that I grew up absolutely loving. He had very bad cataracts in his right eye, and he developed this like amazing this work that I used to look at called Brilliant Fiery Reds and Yellows of Water Lilies, the Japanese bridge. And he did it with cataracts. He could barely see what he was painting, and I just thought that was amazing. And this really just sort of helped inspire me with like doing more and just trying to find out what other sort of creatives were out there that are suffering with visual impairment, like such as Louis Braille. He was the person who developed Braille as a blind person. I thought that was amazing. Found Tammy Ruggles, who is a really brilliant photographer. She really struggles with her eyesight. She's very blurred vision. And some of the work that she produces is absolutely amazing. Eshraf Armagan's completely blind. He does these really incredible paintings of real life images that I described to him, and he manages to paint them. I thought that was amazing. I could do it with my eyes closed. Chris Downey. So Chris Downey was an architect. He's been doing architecture with his eyes closed, as he says, for many years, and he produced some really, really amazing work. So this was, the page is actually not loaded here. I don't know why, but it was this really amazing piece of architecture. I found this person called Visually Impaired Creative, which I thought she was really amazing. I couldn't find her actual name. I found out that it was Angela, but she goes on online as Visually Impaired Designer. She's done some really amazing projects based around a similar thing of like what it's like to see through the eyes of visual impairment. She's got some really great work. Also, there was the Keith Rossen doing some really amazing album covers. So this sort of idea was just to have a look at and just inspire people that would look at this, that might be dealing with visual impairment, that they're not alone. You know, there are a lot of people that are making really amazing stuff with visual constraints. And yeah, I mean, that was the whole process behind it. And it was very therapeutic for me to just kind of find out about all of these amazing artists. And I'm currently thinking about expanding on this project and trying to find out more visual impairment people that are dealing with visual impairment in the creative industries, and find out about their stories and how I can help and share their stories, and we can have conversations about visual impairment. So these were, so in that there's a lot of references there that I used that will come in handy if you want to look at some of the things that where I got research from. There's lots of valuable resource there, and yeah, that is the book. So that was my FMP, and then also I made a video which was based on sort of the dark and the light of visual impairment, which I'll stop sharing now. So I'll share this. So yeah, so I made this film, which this is just a short film to just kind of showcase what the whole project was about, from my own experience from waking up with a visual impairment and dealing with depression and struggling with sort of like the dark side of visual impairment, and then finding out about almost like the incredible stuff that people with visual impairment have done. So I'll share this with you now. Open your phone. Roughly 285 million people are living with a visual impairment. This has been set to triple by 2050. Those with a vision impairment are 2 to 3 times more likely to suffer from depression. Creative outlets have been proven to help people deal with different kinds of trauma. Some of the most amazing work has been produced by visually impaired creatives. There is more to creativity than what meets the eye. See different.
See different.
See different.
See different.
See different.
See different.
See different. See different. See different. Yeah, so that was the sort of promotional film that I made for the project to just showcase what the project was about. And then just to finish on some last tips of if there's anyone out there, if you know anyone that are visually impaired, to not let them feel discouraged, you know. You offer a unique perspective that only a few people can offer. It's like you're very valuable, and being able to understand accessibility and develop accessible products and services really has been proven to increase audience reach, share, and create more engagement, opportunity, improve usability for everyone, and increase customer loyalty just across all products. It's like if you can be more accessible and you can reach out to everybody, everyone, and all, then your brand will have longevity, especially going forward. So yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'll pass you back on to Sam now. And if anyone has any questions, don't be afraid to share your screen or pop your mic off or drop them in the chat, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
Wow, thank you so much, Sam. That was absolutely amazing. So interesting, really, really interesting. I did try to put your website in the chat, but it says the link's expired. So I don't know if you've got a different login you can drop in, just so people can have a look at some of your other work as well, which would be great.
Yeah, of course. I'll have a look now. I don't know why that's expired.
You paid your domain bill.
That might be the actual case. I haven't. I know
yeah.
before I started my new job, so.
I think we have a question there, Sam, from Kelsa.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Hi, Sam. Thanks so much. I work for a fashion tech company, and a big part of my role is diversity and inclusion training. What training do you think we could be offering employees to raise awareness of people with visual impairments? So I think there are certain things that can be done and put into the sort of like the workplace in terms of visual impairment, or put into sort of like students when they're studying. Is that I do have some things here. Is that sorry, I did basically about like sort of being able to provide sort of like certain things such as extra screens, being aware of people need to take extra breaks, or they might need a longevity on certain deadlines and reading time. If you have like calendars, for instance, providing or telling people to get large calendars and diaries is super helpful. With large text, they're readily available online. There's a lot of things such as like document scanners. So if there were certain tools and stuff that you wanted to offer people, you can get iris scanners, which will scan papers and books, and they'll put them online for you, attach it to your computer, and you can change. They can then change the text and the background so it's more legible for them to see. Also flexible lighting. Certain things such as if you are doing any sort of talks, slides, presentations, and you're doing them in a darkened room, then it can be very difficult for like note taking for anyone who is taking notes. Also, if you are, I've been in a few sort of talks where people have provided me sort of like paper and pencil, and it's not really very helpful. It's like if you are going to hand out things for people to take notes, then large paper and like Sharpies, high contrast pens and stuff like that are very important. Just in general, I think flexible lighting, some people prefer bright lights, some people prefer dim lights. It's just a case of being able to talk to people and understand what exactly they need in terms of working. I mean, for me, I was quite lucky with Wilderness that I've got 2 extra screens, and and yeah, I mean, they've just been quite good. I just think readability is very important, like reading speed, understanding that people are going to take a bit longer to read through something than other people. So it's just giving people that time and raising awareness about the time of reading speed and certain things like that. I don't know how helpful that is, but
that's really cool. That's such a good point as well about pencils on paper versus pens on paper. Something you don't really think about that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, there's like quite, I'd say, small things that I think make quite a big difference.
Okay, we've got another question from Bex. I have a quick question about image treatments, like bitmap, etc. Is there any one of them more preferable than others to use?
So not really too much what I've actually looked into, to be honest, and it's something that I should venture into and find more about. I was looking more into, I'd say, more of like the contrasting of images, etc., rather than actually image treatments. So there's definitely something that I need to look into and learn more about. Sorry, I know it doesn't answer your question, but
That's cool. I have a question, Sam.
yeah.
So you've recently started working in your first kind of industry job?
Yes, my first
Yeah.
industry job.
And that's a couple of months now, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So have they been quite accommodating? I think you mentioned it, but have they been quite accommodating for you at the moment? Do you feel that's been happening for you?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm quite fortunate to the point where I don't need that much accommodating in terms of my impairments. For me, it's I have everything that I need at the moment. They're very open into if I was to need anything, I can flag that and they'll sort it out for me. So they're very accommodating, but I kind of have turned up and I have everything already that I need. So I'm quite fortunate in that sense.
I mean, obviously, editing and obviously in our business, you know, it can be quite pressurized, can't it? And deadlines and, you know, things being turned over quite quickly. So again, you mentioned that quite a lot, the importance of giving you more time to do that. So are they kind of sympathetic to that?
Definitely. I mean, I'm quite lucky where the client I work with is quite flexible. Um, for me, I personally, I'm quite a fast worker. I've been working quite intensely for the past 3 years now, having to work twice as hard to try and keep up with my course mates and working a full-time job alongside that. So I've got quite used to working pretty quite a fast pace personally. But I think, yeah, I think a lot of the time you'll find that people are quite flexible. I think as long as you can stay a lot more organized and you can be on top of things and try and talk to your business about getting ahead so you do have that extra time. And if you need sort of support doing that, then I think that's definitely something that can easily be done. So to get that support and not worry about being maybe a little bit slower than someone else, it isn't really a problem. As long as you execute your work to a good standard and you can get the support that you need, then, and which I have. So I'm very fortunate to have that.
We've got a comment from Rukaya. Says, hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm a visually impaired student at UCA, first year fine arts. Your work about accessibility relates to my practice, so I wondered if you'd be up for me interviewing you on accessibility and being visually impaired.
100%, yeah, let's connect. I found it quite difficult finding a lot of different people that are in the creative industry that are suffering with visual impairment. Like I've heard a few stories of here and there of like, oh, my friend's working in the creative industry that's colorblind, but actually reaching out and haven't really had much contact with many visually impaired creatives. So I'm more than happy to connect and to talk about it.
Awesome.
Got another question there from Karina. Can't wait to look and see different in depth. With the use of screens being more vital than ever, what do you find is your biggest pain point when you're looking at things on the screen, like on a website app, for example?
For me personally, it's the size of fonts. The size of fonts, like when I was doing my dissertation, that was a real struggle for me, was like reading a lot in small font. And so sometimes when I was like going on to having to go to the library and trying to read books, and reading a lot of time gave me a lot of eye strain. and these just it was a real struggle. And I think what I sort of did was I kind of tried to spread out my time reading as much as possible and just try and get to the points that I needed rather than reading a lot. I was more sort of just skimming and trying to find out what I actually needed rather than reading through everything and trying to learn everything, because the turn time around that was pretty quick when it comes to our dissertation time. We got pushed forward, and we had very short time to do it. So that was like my biggest issue, was reading on books and on screens, small font really strains my eyes.
And just for perhaps younger students who are starting out, thinking of joining a course, let alone further on from that, thinking of getting a job. You've done both very well, which is amazing. Any sort of tips for them to sort of in that sense of when they first arrive, that sense of awareness, who to contact, and because most universities now have support. Did you have anyone who kind of mentored or helped you through? Obviously, there's the student support group and all of that.
So yeah, I did. I contacted the student support group, and they got me onto sort of like disability awareness, and they helped me a little bit. But I mean, I was almost like quite quiet about my impairment when starting with university. I was kind of like, I just sit at the front. I was quiet about it. I didn't really talk about it much. I just kind of kept it to myself. And I don't know whether that was a confidence issue, but I found that the most supportive people that were around me were just my family and my course mates. In terms of like, if I needed anything, I'll just talk to a course mate about it, and they was very supportive. And that was my main support for me personally, was the people around me letting it be known that I might struggle with something, and they was there to just help me, because they're the people that are with you 24/7 going through that whole process. So I think the most valuable people are the people around you to help you with your support.
But of course, if you're delivering to deadlines and you have to make them, obviously with mitigating circumstances or whatever it might be, obviously that helps, doesn't it, to actually flag up and say, if you feel you can.
Well, yeah, I think it's something that it's not like something that should be ashamed of at all. Like, flag it at all costs. Absolutely. And because it's something that shouldn't be holding you back. It's something that you have to deal with, and that's it really. It's just, there's no sort of two ways about it. Flag it if you can. I mean, flag it as much as possible. Let people be known. Like, introduce yourself. Say, just to let you know, I'm visually impaired. Like, this is what I struggle with, and be very forefront about it, and you'll get as much help as possible.
Yeah, and institutions should be receptive to that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's cool. I just wanted to ask quickly, obviously the project you've done with the book, how did that make you feel? Was that, did that help you as well, in so much as, it's very inspiring, but obviously it's very informative as well. And as you can see from the response, I mean, lots of people, including myself, are very interested to, have a copy of that for the kind of careers advice that I do as well. So that, if I did get somebody who was visually impaired or whatever, I know a bit more about it. But did that help you just to kind of, process what you've been through? And was that something?
I mean, 100%. I mean, I spent, I'd say, a lot of years of my life, from like 18 to say about 25, avoiding it, and just kind of trying to get on with a normal life, and sort of like understanding more about what other people are going through, or being able to see what other people are seeing out of their eyes, and that you're not alone. You're not the only person that is doing this, like trying to pursue a creative career, or trying to pursue any other sort of career, that you're not the only person that is suffering with visual impairment, and that it's actually a lot more common than you think. And that was something that really helped me, because it's something that I avoided for a long time, and I didn't know about the amount of visual impairments there were. and I didn't know how many people were suffering with it and were struggling with depression because of visual impairment. And that did help me a lot. Definitely.
It's amazing. I mean, even just, I was telling my colleague at work about your project and stuff, and he was like, oh yeah, I'm colorblind.
I've had a few experiences like that where I've said oh yeah, I made this list, and like, yeah, I'm colorblind. I'm like, oh, a lot of a lot of people are colorblind, and says like it turns out my brother's slightly colorblind, which I had no idea.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? I mean, and it's interesting you say as well about, being upfront about it and stuff. I mean, when it came to sort of, applying to agencies and for work or placements, whatever it was, like, at what point did you kind of mention it? Is it something you had upfront, like on your CV, or did you wait for people to kind of see your work first and then sort of talk about it afterwards?
Yeah, I don't really have it at the forefront of like my identity in terms of like, because that doesn't define who I am as a, so my sort of like things like, well, I'm going to apply for it with my work, and you'll see my project. Obviously I have this project, and people will then understand and get to know that I'm visually impaired, and would have a deeper conversation when I met them in person about it, and about what the struggles and constraints are for me entering the workplace. And that's sort of like how I approached it. I mean, at the moment it was very difficult sort of searching for work, dealing with a lot of rejection, and it kind of does make you sit back and think, oh, is there a reason that people see in my project that I am visually impaired, and they're thinking twice about it, and they want to hire someone else who's more able-bodied than I am? But I don't think that's the case. I think it was just a case of there was a lot of people applying for jobs at the moment. And I think, I mean, yeah, it's not a defining factor. It's not something that's not going to get you work. It's not your identity, but I think it's something that you can offer as well. It's something that is valuable because you understand accessibility. You firsthand understand accessibility, so you actually have quite a big value for a lot of brands.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to make that exact point, actually. I mean, when people see that you've done a whole project on accessibility, for brands, people really, really want to know more about that stuff. So they could, it's more accessible for their customers. So you've kind of turned it into an absolute asset for their team, which is amazing. I mean, the reason I asked that question is because I've been asked by students before who, for instance, suffer from they've had like a back injury or something like that, and they're like, should I put that on my CV? Will people be angry if I'm not upfront about it? But I guess it's a balance, isn't it? Like, you want to show them what you can do and who you are. As you say, you're not defined by that one particular thing about you.
100%. And I think like just showcase your work. I mean, that's what everyone is doing. That people aren't turning up saying, oh, I'm able-bodied, I'm this and that. It's not something that they define themselves as, and something you shouldn't define yourself as and define your work as. It's just part of your character, and just some of the things that you might need support on. And I think seeing it in a perspective of you can use it in a positive way, and you can use it to help people, and you can use it to improve different brands, and it can be seen as a positive in some senses.
Yeah, 100%. Cool. So we're going into the last 5 minutes. So if there's any other last questions, do put them in the chat. But I guess to kind of finish off, looking now that you've you've got your first job, congratulations. You've gone through graduation, lockdown as well. So I guess what are some of the pieces of advice looking back now that you would have for your younger self?
Oh, be more upfront about it. Which I did try to be, but I feel like I would not have let it set me back. Like, it set me back probably, I'd say, 6 years of my life where I wasn't pursuing things because I didn't feel I was able to, and it's just not the case. And that is the main thing I'll tell myself is just not let it hold you back at all. It's, yeah. Yeah, I don't have anything else to say.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been so inspiring, so interesting. Hearing about your journey and your project. Thank you everyone for coming along as well. Please do spread the word about See Different. We will be I'll send like the links around and stuff on email as well, just to make sure that everyone kind of can have a look a little bit more in depth of Sam's project. And yeah, thank you so much for coming along to the Tern Student Takeover. Do have a look at the website. We can help you out, upload your projects. There's loads of stuff going on. Thank you so much, Sam. Really, really inspiring. And thank you, Paul, as well, for helping to field the questions. And yes, thank you, everybody. And we'll see you at the next Student Takeover.